Hey guys, it's Bella and welcome to Lazy the Goodies group lesson number 13, and our historical tidbit for this week is Gothic martial arts and Gothic warfare, and we are sort of elaborating on we've gone from considering the macro level social and political implications of warfare in the Ostrogothic period to looking at the more personal, like what individual soldiers did. And of course, according to Patrick Amory and various other writers on the Ostrogothic period, and also I think the Visigothic period, the simple fact is that Gothic warfare practices seem not to have differed massively from late Roman antique practices. So we need to look at the Roman army in late antiquity to get some insight into how the Goths were doing things. And as such, for instance, we have a detail here from Trajan's column, which granted is the 2nd century Common Era, so it's a couple of centuries before late antiquity and before the Goths. But it shows, for instance, Roman soldiers with curved rectangular scuda, which is their shields, and they're using them in a formation known as a testudo, which is a tortoise, and it forms this sort of fort that is like safe from missiles. However, Roman soldiers that are fighting outside of the protection of this testudo are using oval shields. And I think this is worth thinking about, because if you think about it, if you look at the way that their shields are overlapping, interlocked, you need a large number of well-trained, well-disciplined soldiers in order to make this effective. Whereas the soldiers who are outside of that, who are fighting individually, they seem to be carrying oval shields. And I think there's a reason why that's the case even back in earlier times of the Roman Empire. Also note the legionaries are wearing plate mail, which in late antiquity was a bit too expensive, so they couldn't mass produce this plate mail, and it was replaced with chainmail, as we're talking about here. So the main changes in arms and armour from the sort of classical Roman period to late antiquity is that plate armour was replaced with chainmail armour, longer Sparta swords, which are about 80 to 100 centimetres in length, which previously had been used only by cavalry. These replaced the shorter gladius swords, which are about 60 to 80 centimetres in total length, and they started to be used by infantry also. Note also that the sort of ratios of the Roman army and the Gothic army changed in late antiquity. So as sort of Roman army was Germanized and employed more German mercenaries, including the Goths, there was a greater emphasis on cavalry as opposed to infantry. And lastly, shields went from being rectangular and curved to ovular and flat, as we mentioned earlier. Here are some surviving Roman gladi. They're quite interesting. Some interesting things to note. They're not like later medieval swords. They don't have a crossguard, so they don't offer very much protection to the hand. And this is because this is a weapon that you're always using sort of with a shield. Although some Romans may well have carried them individually on the streets and such lot, they aren't sort of designed for individual one-on-one fighting so much. They're designed for sort of large-scale group fighting. And I mentioned this last week about an alternative, the Roman army's adoption of the Sparta sword. I've gone over this. Here is a surviving Sparta sword blade, and you can notice that it's longer. You can also notice, interestingly, that it thickens a bit. There's a lateral widening, and towards the end of the sword it broadens out, which gives the thinner end of the sword a more sort of effective cutting force, which, if we remember from last week, that the Roman writer Vegetius says that the Romans prefer stabbing with their swords as opposed to cutting with them. The fact that in late antiquity, when you have more Germanics fighting within the Roman army and fighting with the Roman army, and we get swords that are designed more like this, which are more capable of delivering effective cutting injuries, that tells us something about how the nature of martial arts were changing in the transition from the classical era of Rome to late antiquity. And these are the sorts of changes which may have been brought about by the inclusion of Goths and other Germanics in the Roman army, or they may have been changes that were already happening and the Goths adopted to. It's hard to say. Here we have some 3rd century Roman chainmail armour, and an interesting note about sort of reenactment armor. It's a bit hard to see, but this chainmail armor is riveted. So, if I understand this correctly, it's a process wherein there's some piece of metal that connects the if you imagine the individual rings as like a string that you loop in around itself. There's a bit of metal that connects them, and this kind of chainmail armor is by far the most common historically. The kind that you can normally get in reenactment stalls and all the rest of it is actually relatively rare historically, and apparently it was used by some medieval Japanese warriors, but historically is quite rare. So watch out for that in your reenactment market. If you want the really high quality, historically authentic chainmail, you have to pay a bit more. And here we have a surviving Roman shield from Dura Europos. It's the kind of square shield, but there's an interesting thing we can take away from this is that this could have been a parade shield. It's entirely possible. But we have references even in military campaigns, such as Lactantius's description of the Roman civil war between, that's a yes, exactly, riveted chainmail, avoid the buttock chainmail. Yeah, so we can see even accounts of the Roman civil war between the Emperor Constantine and his rival Maxentius, that people had painted shields and they went into battle with colourful decoration. So that might give us an idea of what their shields would look like. So let's now look more specifically at warfare for the Ostrogoths. So under King Theodoric the Great, the Ostrogoths seem to have maintained a more Roman style of military, except with the obvious distinction that the military was now comprised largely of Goths. And there are frequent references in Cassiodorus's Variae, which are the sort of state papers of the Ostrogothic government, to these sort of military camps, campos, which Patrick Amory suggests might have used the Gothic language as a cant. So it might have been that in the camps the sort of military language was a descendant of Gothic in some way. It could have been Latin as well, with a lot of Gothic words mixed in. We don't quite know. We obviously don't have any sort of records of this language, but he suggests that this language would have been quite different to the sort of biblical Gothic that we learn, because it's a sort of spoken vernacular and it's not really a literary language like biblical Gothic was in the time of the Ostrogothic kingdom. And we have a few references to the persistence of this as a language associated with the military in the Ostrogothic kingdom. Notably, for instance, many of the Ostrogothic royals, such as Queen Amalasuintha, are described as speaking 3 languages. Presumably these are Latin, Greek and Gothic. And also there is a Roman, curiously, called Cyprian, who impresses King Theodoric by learning to speak Gothic himself and teaching it to his children, which is really curious. I think he's the only person we have evidence of learning Gothic, or named at least, to have learned Gothic in the Ostrogothic kingdom, although I'm sure many did for various reasons. However, so standing armies, such as the one that King Theodoric brought into Italy, his Goths, who then would rule Italy, although they were originally a Roman military organisation, they seem to have become associated with Gothicness under Theodoric's rule. And we had this quote last week in our tidbit, De Barbis qui volverem jure testari, saying that for the barbarians who certainly fight for the Republic, we give license of giving testimony, however they wish and they may, whether they shall be drawn up at home or in the camps. And this is from Theodoric's law code, and it's basically incorporating this barbarian Gothic military power into Roman law. So it's sort of attempting to Romanize the military culture of the Ostrogoths. And this is a design of a Roman camp, granted from Greece, but Roman camps across the empire were quite uniform, and chances are very good that the Ostrogoths would have simply imitated these camps, especially because, if you bear in mind, King Theodoric himself, who led military campaigns with the Ostrogoths earlier on in his years, he was raised as a hostage in Constantinople and therefore trained in Greco-Roman culture and warfare. So there's decent reason to believe that Ostrogothic military camps would have had a similar layout to this one, and we're going to do a lesson after we come back from our Christmas break on Recopolis, the only sort of city that was built by the Goths, and it gives us a really interesting chance to see what they did when they had left to their own devices in terms of building things. And there are some similarities with that city and how military camps like this one here were constructed. We can see here in this sarcophagus, completely removed from the camps, what the sort of scene of a battle might have been like. And it's interesting to note here that this is a very like late Roman thing, because most of the soldiers are in fact on horseback or have fallen from horseback, and this is granted from a Roman perspective. So it shows the Goths in these with these really scraggly beards, long hair, sleeved tunics, all the rest of this, and they're just out of control essentially. And they're also sometimes wearing these Phrygian caps that are associated with barbarians, whereas the Romans are either clean shaven or they've got a very maintained Greek stoic beard. They're wearing scale armor and all the rest of it, and they're sort of in their military might trampling the Goths. But the very fact that they sort of felt the need to do such exaggerated depictions, did the Goths actually use the Phrygian cap? Very good question. I do not have a good answer for that. It's hard to say because there's very few artworks of the Ostrogoths depicting themselves, and those who are depicting themselves are the sort of royals, so they're of course not representative. I will try and get an answer to that question of whether the Goths used the Phrygian cap in later lessons. A couple of things also we can notice from earlier is the use of these oval shields, these sort of slightly longer swords, stuff like this. This is all very characteristic of late antique Roman and Gothic warfare, because the distinction between Roman and Gothic styles of fighting seem to have blurred a bit. So lastly, as I mentioned earlier, Ada Brun von Hofmeier in 1960 proposes that the Italian and German styles of martial arts, you guys may know this as HEMA, that we witness in the 15th century fight book corpus. She argues that these are actually descendants of styles of martial arts which ultimately began in antiquity. The Romans, following Vegetius's edicts, favoured weapons optimised for stabbing, and the Germanics, in the meantime, preferred weapons that were optimised more for cutting. And we can see this reflected in the archaeology. Swords associated with Germanic-speaking groups, whether it be the Goths, the Gepids, the Norse, etc., they all have broader blades, or not all, but they generally have broader blades, sometimes even a dulled tip that they're more optimised for cutting, and the Roman ones are more pointed. They've got a sort of diamond-shaped point optimised for stabbing into people. So there are some flaws in the logic, but there may well be something to it. And we will end here with, now granted not Gothic, unless you accept the theory that the Goths originally came from Sweden, but this is a 6th century sword recently found in Sweden, and it's quite representative of what swords would have looked like in the 6th century. So Ostrogothic swords would have looked very similar to this, and if you go to major sort of museums of warfare, such as the Walter collection in London, for instance, the Wallace collection in London, you can see swords like this. And that is it. So now we have finished our tidbit. We're going to go on to our our Gothic lesson. Yay, language! Okay, so 13th lesson. So with this lesson, we're introducing finally a new verb class, and this is the second week conjugation of verbs. So unlike the first week one, which is underscored by its use of yan for an infinitive ending, the second week one is well known for ending in on or on. And it's one of the commonest words in the language, frion, from which the word frions, meaning friend, comes. It can be found to belong to this second week group. And so here is our conjugation pattern for this. So frio is I love, frios is you love, frioth is he, she, it, they love, friom is we love, frioth is you love, and then friond is they plural love. And we've got a word stock as well. So and these are mostly sort of new week 2 verbs. So atlathon is to call over, farinon to be happy, frion to love, huarvon to walk, galathon to invite, Meton to consider, sphelon to tell, werthon to value, raton to travel, dulth is a party, which is quite fun, and unte is a conjunction. It means sort of because. So, with now that we've got all these words, can anyone typing in voice translate from me from Gothic into English? Ratozu land mean. Have you been given therch here? No. So therch, I'll just tell you, is the conjunction meaning through. And if someone could type it up for me in chat, or I can do it myself, that would be most helpful. Anyone want to type the answer for me in chat, or just say it aloud? Go for it. Feel free. Ratozu. There.
Do you travel?
Yes. Are you traveling? Good.
Do you travel through my
land? Exactly. Yes. Are you traveling through my country? Very well done. Second one. Huila fina huerto. Goodness. So you haven't got huila here in the word stock, but huila is time, basically. So huila fina huerto. Who knows what that is? Sorry, your time was yeah. So work, not quite. Goodness, workian is worth. Yeah. So it's related to things to word worth. So werthon is to value. So huila thina wertho. Huila thina are both sort of feminine accusatives and singular. So that means that it's like a single time or hour. Thina is yours, and then wertho is, it's like I worthy or I value it. Exactly. Good work, guys. And so you should do the rest of these on your own, in your own time, including the English to Gothic, because that's what we need, English to Gothic, to get us speaking and reviving this language. But for now, let us look at the past of Frion, because we've been doing the past tense now. And you might notice that the pattern sort of carries over. So we have friotha is I loved. Friothes is you singular loved. Friotha is you he, she, it, or they loved. So I can hear somebody's something, if they could mute, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Friodedum is we loved. Friodedum is you plural loved, and friodedum is they loved. So a couple more words. We have atls, which is every, huarias, which is which, sums, which is some, metons, which is idea, and then meton, which is idea, but this is the accusative form. And we have a couple of phrases which are very useful. So dagen huamech is every day or daily, and then hise nacht is tonight. And his is quite a weird, sorry, not weird, but it's rare kind of word. And Yoshi has just typed out the sentence in chat. Who can give me an answer for, what this means in English? Ars gomaiach alla quinno thani galatha frions means was. And galatha, if we look back up at our word stock, galathon is to invite. So, yes, who can give me a translation? As gomaiach alla quinno thani galatha frions means was.
All men and all women are invited to be my friend.
Close, yes.
Where?
So yes, close. So so every so algoma alquina, every man and every woman, and then thani galatha is a sort of subordinate clause, and it means like who I invited. So the other is like invited, and then frions means was is was my friend. So we could rearrange the sentence to say as gomaiach alla quino frions and it would be a bit more sensible in English, and it would be pale, not quite. So it's every man and every woman.
That I invited was a friend of mine.
Exactly. Yes. What about the next one? And summa ahwa ratoda yachdo ahwa frioda. Which is, and so ahwa is a river. Think of the word aqua. Well, if you don't know Latin, this is not going to help you. Ignore me. I guess you can think of the word aqueous in English. Like watery. It's like a river. And is just upon, basically, or to, up until, etc. So an summa ahwa rarada yachdo ahwa frioda. Anyone? Anyone want to give me an answer? Don't be shy. I see someone typing an answer. This is very exciting. Yes. The tension is killing me. It's not. It's fine. Just write an answer.
What does the end mean, just real quick?
And is up to or towards. Summa. And summa rarada yachdo ahwa frioda. Yes, Yoshi has gotten it, of course. But if anyone wants to find out an answer, that would be great. Lol. Yeah. So I'll wait till the hair is finished up. Yes. So I see why you thought horse for aqua pale, but no, I think it's goodness. It might be it's a very similar word. Huh?
Ehwa, I think is horse.
Ehwa, that's it, with an AI, that's it, exactly, yeah. Ehwa is horse, ahwa is river. So it's like towards a river, rata is I travelled. Yach vo aqua, so vo aqua is accusative, so it's the thing that's being X'd. Yach vo aqua frioda, and I loved the river. I enjoyed the river. Wonderful. Good work, guys. And that is the end. You really should do these exercises on your own. Basically at any time, because I'm just here working all day. If you're stuck in your own time later in the week doing your work exercises, you can message me and I'm happy to walk through things with you. But for the time being, let us finish reading at long last the first of our Hammenumening, the colloquy Leiden, say the Leiden conversation. And we have gone all the way to the very last one now, part 8. I believe that's it, yeah, part 8. Okay, so I'll read it out, and if anyone identifies any cognates, shout them out in chat. So, Maho means rief mis bord, Yachsum me in tewa du grith gangan, Yach lektion verganga. In watergrava dana saman, Athan was, dan gwima yach I savan nimmado hehat, Yach afarithia, dan chran you in watergrava gwimanv. So, can anyone identify or guess what any of these sentences or parts of the sentences mean? Perhaps, maybe you recognize a word similar to English or a language you speak. Marco means is my boy. Very good. Any others? Give me bread. So give me board. In this case, it's. I see why you thought that. In this case, it's give me. Literally, give me the board. Give me like a writing tablet. Yes, bread is slefs, exactly. Ja, somme in tewa de grith gangan. So so the first sentence is Marco means give me body ach summe in te wat du grith gangan jak lektion ganga. So it is my boy, give me the board, and some are going into an order in order to study. Jak lektion ganga, and I will go over the lesson. So the gang is literally sort of through go. So I will go through the lesson like I'm doing. In Watagrava Vanasaman, and so Watagrava is a bath or a sort of bathroom. In Watagrava Vanasaman is together into the bathroom or the bathhouse. Athan was is however I was. Vanoch quimayach isavan nimmadol hehat. Then I come and I ask if I can take the linen, basically the fine linen. It's an I come and he asks that I bring or take the linen, which is savan, a loan from Latin, incidentally. Yach afar idvia, and then I went back. Vanochran yuin watagrava quimans. Then I ran yuin watagrava quimans, now coming in to the bathhouse. So this is it's a bit hard to identify specifically who is saying what, but essentially what's happening is it's a home education scene. They sort of go over a lesson and then it's essentially bedtime, so the boy goes off and he has a bath and then he dries himself and then presumably afterwards goes to bed. So we have come to the end of the first Collowy in the Helmenelmet episode of Osithiana, otherwise known as the Cascarians. We're going to have another one next week, newly translated. And thank you guys so much for coming. If you have any questions, I should have mentioned, feel free to point them out in voice. Or you can ask me later on, or you can ask in the comment section of the YouTube video. And until next time, thank you guys for watching, and bye.